My word, Pax Autocratica is equal parts janky and fun, and I have genuinely never played, let alone reviewed, a game quite like it. You're placed in charge of a comically draconian regime that feels like something pulled straight out of Starship Troopers. But instead of settling for being a political or colony management game, Pax Autocratica throws you personally into the action as a first-person shooter, folds in roguelite progression, and then somehow manages to stitch all these genres together into one functioning game. And yes, it is every bit as chaotic as that sounds. Welcome to LT Gaming, my name is Tom, and this is our Should You Buy series where we weigh up the good, the bad, and ultimately give you our honest take on whether a game is worth parting with your hard-earned cash for. Now, I've spent around 8 to 10 hours playing this game ahead of its early access release on the 10th of August. It's going to launch for $30 with a 17% discount, and that will bring it down roughly to $25. Before we jump in, this video isn't sponsored, all opinions are entirely our own, and believe me, I've got quite a few of them here. So can all of these wildly different ideas possibly work together, and should you buy Pax Autocratica when it launches into early access? Let's take a proper look. Now, normally this is the point where I explain what a game actually is, and Pax Autocratica makes that slightly more complicated because the answer just appears to be, yep, it does that. The universe doesn't seem to contain any traditional good guys, and you're certainly not one of them. You play as the representative of a wonderfully draconian regime. And the game handles all of this with a fair amount of humour. It knows how absurd its premise is, and it doesn't take it too seriously. Your ultimate goal is to work through an FTL-style map of interconnected instances and sectors and eventually defeat the final boss. First-person combat acts as the game's action engine. You drop into planets and to bases, fighting through waves of enemies to trigger an objective or complete a mission. It's fast, frantic, and feels a little bit like an old-school arena shooter, akin to something like Unreal Tournament. Then you're back at your home base and it turns into a management game. It starts relatively simply and then grows some legs, with research, resource gathering, soldier management, prisoner interrogation, and the construction of new ships and equipment, all demanding your attention. And then overlaid across both sides are persistent roguelite mechanics. Resources collected during expeditions can improve your base, discover blueprints allow you to fabricate new equipment, and both you and your soldiers can be developed across multiple runs. The various layers do connect, albeit somewhat weakly. Your colony prepares you for your expeditions. Expeditions provide the resources and tech needed to expand the colony, and growing that strength allows you to push further into the sector map. So the easiest description I can give you is Unreal Tournament meets Hades meets Conan Exiles. An absolutely ridiculous sentence, but somewhat accurate. Now, to focus on the good, I think the single greatest strength of this game is its ability to generate chaotic fun inside this comically dystopian universe. The first-person combat is fast and incredibly frantic at times. You're dashing around, double jumping over enemies, and generally moving at a pace that feels closer to an old-school arena shooter than a modern tactical FPS. Enemies can properly swarm you. The difficulty occasionally ramps up quite sharply, and you do need to be comfortable with the game asking you to do a lot at once. The shooting system isn't going to trouble the very best games in the genre, but it does its job, and the upgrade system gives each expedition much more flavour. As you progress through a run, you collect core fragments, and this allows you to shape a build in a similar way to something like Hades. During one run, I focused on faster reloads and straightforward damage bonuses. On another, I built around missiles and energy orbs, filling the battlefield with splash damage and just watching everything disappear. Those temporary upgrades don't carry between your runs, which means you become invested in making that particular build work. It gives you a lot of room to experiment rather than permanently settling on the choice of weapons and setup, for example. But surprisingly, it was the colony management that really sank its hooks into me. Your base begins as this fairly Spartan little outpost. You gather some resources and unlock new tech, and it gradually transforms into a full-blown military installation. And you can physically walk around it in first person, and that growth then feels far more tangible than just watching some buildings appear on an overhead map. There is something bloody cool about walking through a facility that you've personally developed, seeing your soldiers train, and watching this increasingly elaborate war machine come to life around you. Before long, I found myself worrying about morale, food selection, and how effectively I was developing my troops. Soldiers come with different traits and stats. There appears to be an enormous amount of room here to optimize your forces if you properly want to dig into it. I even started wandering through my barracks at night to check on everyone as they slept. I gotta say, I was a truly benevolent dictator. The prisoner interrogation system fits into this fantasy as well. It remains fairly light mechanically, but adds to the feeling that you're running this ridiculously morally questionable regime without pushing the tone into the grim side of things. And I gotta say, the game is remarkably easy to understand considering all the systems it's throwing together, and the tutorial does a good job. And when all of these systems do come together, the game can produce some genuinely brilliant spectacles. The final battle for Sector 1 took me completely by surprise, for example. I found myself charging towards this enormous nuclear monstrosity in a battle that lasted about 20 minutes. There were tanks, defensive turrets, troops, missiles coming in, absolute pandemonium, and I loved it. Messy, ridiculous, and very ambitious. The game does feel rough and ready, but it's almost part of the charm. I will come onto this later. Few performance drops here and there, but nothing catastrophic. Before we move on to the bad side of things, if you are enjoying the video, give it a like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay up to date with all things gaming and demonstrate your unwavering loyalty to the glorious regime of LT Gaming. Right, I think I might need to put this game down now, but on to the next section. Okie dokie, on to the bad side of things now. And I mentioned the charm before being rough and ready, but it only carries the game so far. And I do think the game's biggest weakness is a general lack of polish, particularly when you get into the core FPS gameplay. The weapons are serviceable, and there are some enjoyable options, but they lack in variety and the tactile quality you want from a top tier shooter. And because first person combat occupies such a significant part of the game, being functional isn't always enough. Its relentlessly fast pace is not going to suit everyone either. There were times when I wanted a natural break in the action, some cover to fall behind, an opportunity to regroup, or a tactical decision that could shift the direction of the battle. Instead, I usually found the correct response was just to keep moving and firing like a complete nutter until everything stopped moving. The enemy AI doesn't really help matters. Enemies do appear slightly clueless, they frequently clump together rather than behaving like an organised force, and your own troops aren't that much more sophisticated, meaning battles can descend into enormous groups of friendly and enemy soldiers just piling into one another. And I generally adopted what I call the Bannerlord solution. Issue the same basic order every time, send everyone forward, and hope the numbers work out themselves. This lack of tactical nuance becomes apparent as battles scale up. The final showdown in Sector 1 worked because its sheer spectacle overwhelmed the rough edges, but that trick doesn't remain effective indefinitely. The game is pretty bloody tough as well, and you could take this as a positive or a negative. The difficulty gives your upgrades and comically prep a genuine purpose, but sudden spikes can make the already frantic combat feel a little bit exhausting. After completing several similar instances, I could find myself becoming drained. Missions, enemies, and environments do begin to repeat, so it definitely needs more variety in the game. Progression can also veer dangerously close to grind. Without the late game save files supplied to me, I would definitely still be in Sector 1 after 8 to 10 hours. A long campaign is perfectly welcome in a roguelite, but each new run does need to feel meaningfully different and give you enough variation to feel compelling. The quality management side has the skeleton of something very engrossing. Several systems do need to be properly fleshed out though. As the base grows, I'd like the ability to appoint overseers or automate routines, so it does feel a bit less manual. Most of these problems do feel fixable though. The foundation is here, but Pax Autocratica needs more mission variety, smarter battles, some deeper tactical options, and considerably more polish during its early access period. So, should you buy Pax Autocratica? Honestly, it's been one of the harder reviews I've had to put together in some time because the game wears so many different hats. At roughly $25 with launch discount, I do think there's enough here to justify the price. There is a substantial amount of gameplay, even if the content doesn't always remain fresh. My verdict, however, comes with some fairly significant caveats. It's a buy for players who enjoy roguelites, base building, and frantic first-person shooters, and the key word here is all. These genres are all fundamental parts of the experience, and you can't really separate one from the others. If that combination appeals and you're willing to tolerate some early access jank, there is something genuinely fun and different here. It's a wait for anyone who needs a more polished and thoroughly tested experience. The devs have published a roadmap that addresses some of the concerns I've raised, but the combat needs more tactical depth and missions and enemies need greater variety. And I'd recommend avoiding it if any one of its central genres immediately puts you off. If you dislike roguelike progression, base management, or this relentlessly fast FPS combat, you're going to struggle to enjoy the complete package. The game is ambitious, messy, and completely unlike anything else I've reviewed. It will not be for everyone, but somehow, despite all the jank, I had a bloody good time with it. Let me know what you think of the game down in the comments below, and whether you'll be joining the glorious regime when it launches. Thanks for watching guys, my name is Tom and this is LT Gaming, and as always I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye now.